Hello and welcome to LFC Focus. It is pre-match build-up showtime as Liverpool return to Premier League action after a long and, I think it's fair to say, arduous international break. The last 2 weeks have taken a pretty heavy toll on Liverpool's squad, as if we weren't struggling already in terms of injuries and player availability. And I will of course come on to all of that later on in the video, and Jurgen Klopp's press conference today and the players that he confirmed were and were not going to be available for this game against Leicester on Sunday evening at 5:15. But before that, not 5:15, 7:15. But before that, I think it's important to recognise that this game, as slightly daunting as it is, given the circumstances with injuries, player availability, and also the side we're facing, it's the most difficult game of the run we've got coming up. After this, we play relegation fodder or thereabouts in Brighton and Fulham. We've then got a game against Wolves, who are obviously a tough side to play, but that is at home. And all in between all of those, we have got 3 Champions League games in a group that we've relatively sewn up. And I don't want to sound too optimistic to the point of just blind optimism, but things maybe aren't as bad as people may think they are. And if you were going to pick a point in the season where we would have all these injury troubles, you would have probably picked this run of fixtures over maybe the ones we had earlier on, where we were playing Chelsea and Arsenal and Everton and stuff like that. I know the injuries start to creep in during those games, but Liverpool are very much backs against the wall at the moment in terms of the team that we're going to have to put out because of how many injuries we've got. And I would say that this is probably the best time we could really get it, even though this is a very, very difficult game. And of course, with Leicester coming into this top of the league, which is something that I don't think has actually been talked about enough. You know, Liverpool are actually playing catch up with them at the moment. There's no games in hand. There's no caveats to be made. Leicester have got more points than we have at this stage. And maybe the only caveat you can make is that maybe they've had more difficult games. But to be fair to them, they've gone to the Etihad and won, which we didn't do. They've gone to the Emirates and won as well. So these games away against big 6 sides seem to actually suit them very well. So of course it's going to be really, really difficult for Liverpool. And like I said, it's backs against the wall. It's really, everyone's just going to have to knuckle down and power through and try and get a result from this game. But there's a status quo to be established here, and that status quo is that regardless of who's on the pitch, Liverpool are a better team than Leicester. On paper, on grass, wherever you want to put it, Liverpool should be winning this match, especially at home. Listen, if it was at the King Power, you'd probably look at it and say, with all the variables coming in, the fact that this season is different to any other, and sometimes you just have to take a good point away from home, as we did at the Etihad, and as we kind of did at Goodison Park as well, regardless of circumstances. Last season, I would have said every game, Liverpool should be winning it. This time around, you know, you're not going to get 100 points. You'd be lucky to break 90. 85 probably wins you the league this year. So we've seen the return of a good point. However, I think because this is at home, Liverpool should be going hell for leather to make sure that they win this game. And listen, you can get too bogged down in looking at the bigger picture and looking at the season as a whole and thinking that we maybe just don't have enough in our locker with the injuries we've had to make it all the way to the end of the season and win big prizes. But the fact of the matter is, we're working on a game-by-game basis at the moment. I think Jurgen Klopp and all his coaching staff are not really looking much further past this match until that full-time whistle blows. And the same definitely goes for the players. I don't think their vision of the future stretches beyond the 90th minute against Leicester until that minute passes, the final whistle blows, and then their entire world becomes the home game against Atalanta on Wednesday night, simply because with the way the games are coming so thick and fast, you can't be looking 1 or 2 months ahead and thinking about what you're going to do then, because A, there's too many games before that point comes around, and B, you've got no idea what's going to happen. You can plan for injuries, you can rotate players in and out and give them rest to try and minimise the stress that their muscles are being put under. And yes, you get freak injuries like the one to Van Dijk and Gomez, which is of course obviously a little bit of a blow for Liverpool that we've had 2 massive freak injuries to 2 really, really important players within our starting 11. But you can plan for muscle injuries to a degree and stuff like that. You can't plan for coronavirus. You can't legislate for your player picking up that illness. You can legislate for the fact that they're probably all going to get it at some point this season, but you can't really anticipate when that's going to happen or how it's going to happen. So as a result, you've kind of just got to go on a game-by-game basis. And when you look at this match in isolation, when you don't think about everything that's to come, the fact we play at Atalanta 3 days afterwards, we then play Brighton 3 days after that, then it becomes a daunting task. But when you just look at the players we've got available, and I'm sure this is what Jurgen Klopp and his staff will be doing, and look at the team they've got to beat and focus on nothing other than that, then actually I think this kind of becomes a winnable task. And of course, there is the added impetus that regardless of what players are available, this is still Liverpool playing at home in the Premier League. There's a 63-game run to be protected here. I don't want to see Liverpool lose that run. Of course, it's going to happen at some point. There's a record in sight. I think it's 86 games. Chelsea went unbeaten at home way back in, I think, 2008 was when it was actually Liverpool who broke that unbeaten run. So there's a record to be broken there, and hopefully Liverpool do break it. Of course, at some point, we're going to lose at home in the league, but I don't want that to just be, oh, because we had certain players missing. I don't want to be looking back at our home record and be going, oh, well, that was because Nat Phillips was playing. That's because Reece Williams was playing. We didn't have Van Dijk or anything like that. This is still Liverpool. It's still Liverpool managed by Jurgen Klopp. These are still players that Jurgen Klopp and his staff have handpicked because they are good enough to play for Liverpool Football Club, regardless of whether they've been playing in the first team for 3 years or whether, like Reece Williams or Nat Phillips, they've only just been brought into the side on a semi-regular basis. They are still good enough to play for Liverpool, and therefore they are still good enough to protect that home record of 63, hopefully, fingers crossed, 64 home league games unbeaten, and they are still good enough to beat Leicester City, regardless of what players they put out as well. So team news going into the game, it's not great. I'll preface that if any of you aren't aware of what's been going on. Henderson, not available, unfortunately. He's been back at the new training ground in Kirby, which is obviously great to see. But unfortunately, that injury he picked up, again, on international duty. And I don't want to get into that too much. I'm sure anyone who's been watching this channel for a while knows how I feel about internationals. I don't really like them, especially in the middle of the season, especially in a season like this. But Jordan Henderson, not available for this game. Trent Alexander-Arnold, still unavailable after picking up that injury before the international break as well in the game against Man City at the Etihad. Salah, unavailable because of coronavirus. I know they're doing absolutely everything they can to try and get him available as soon as possible. He seems to be taking a test every 12 hours or something ridiculous like that. We got a bit of false hope from the Egyptian FA because they said that they were confident that Salah would return a negative swab before he had to make the return from international duty, and that would of course put him back into contention to play for Liverpool in this game against Leicester. Maybe there's a chance he does another swab on Sunday morning and is absolutely fine, and I'm not hugely clear on the rules. I thought that it was once you did that positive test, you just isolate for 10 or 14 days, depending on what the law is at the time, and then you're able to play again. But it seems if you can do multiple tests, once you test negative, that's absolutely fine, and that was why the problem Ronaldo had wasn't the period of isolation when he caught coronavirus on the international break before last, but the fact he kept testing positive every time they thought that he was going to be in the clear. And the same might go for Mo Salah, and listen, it's possible that he misses the game against Atalanta as well. I don't think it will go past that because the illness seems to disappear after 2 weeks, and Mo Salah has been absolutely fine. We've heard that he's been basically symptomless and hasn't been ill in any way from the illness, which is obviously a huge boost, and hopefully in the long run maybe this even benefits him. You know, he misses out on the exhausting international break, he gets a couple more games of rest, and hopefully comes back fit and firing and absolutely free of illness and everything like that once he's available to return for Liverpool. So like I said, maybe he returns a negative swab and plays in this game, but it doesn't sound like Liverpool are expecting that to happen, and it looks like we are planning for this match without him. So I wouldn't put any money at all on Mo Salah playing any part in this game. However, Fabinho is back in full training, which is obviously absolutely brilliant to see. Thiago and Oxlade-Chamberlain, who's also returned to training, which of course has been a wonderful surprise. We were never really given a huge timescale on his injury. I think when it happened, it was given as 6 to 8 weeks, but since then, Jurgen hasn't really said when he's expected Ox to be back, although this kind of scans within that time frame that this would be the right time for him to return. Jurgen said in his press conference that for all of them, it's kind of a we'll see scenario, which is obviously for me and for anyone else who isn't at the training ground day in, day out, very difficult to call whether or not they're going to be available for this game. But I think given that Fabinho's in full training, I'd say it's more likely that he's going to play. And the fact the injury didn't keep him out for long. Jurgen Klopp has said about Thiago that the longer the player stays out, the more time they need for rehabilitation. And that's why maybe, even though Thiago's been back at the training ground and been participating in some sessions, he probably will be maybe a week or so away from playing any super intense, full starting role in the team. But given that Fabinho only hobbled off against Midtjylland, which was just a few weeks ago, although given how quick the games come, that feels like a lifetime ago now, I think he's a little bit closer. And then Oxlade-Chamberlain, probably maybe a couple weeks before we see him in any meaningful role in the side. But it is, of course, great to have him back at the AXA Training Centre, as it is now, rather than Melwood. So, as for how Liverpool are going to line up then, I think the centre-half pairing, even though Fabinho is available, I think we go with Matip and Reece Williams, partially because, as anyone who's seen the last few videos on this channel will know, I think Reece Williams is really good. I rate him a lot. I thought he was fantastic against Atalanta. I think, yeah, we're still taking that horses for courses approach, and I can see why Nat Phillips was selected over him for the game against West Ham. Jurgen Klopp was absolutely vindicated in that. Nat Phillips gets the man of the match award, but I think up against Jamie Vardy, Nat Phillips great in the air, but maybe less mobile. Reece Williams, I don't want to jump to too many conclusions with Virgil van Dijk comparisons, but trait-wise and style-wise, they seem quite similar. You know, Reece Williams, very, very calm on the ball. He looks good under pressure. And you know Jamie Vardy is just going to run at our centre-halves all day, especially if we have a kid like Reece Williams or Nat Phillips in there. And Nat Phillips, you know, I'm sure he wouldn't make any errors, but he's probably going to be more inclined to just clear the ball when he gets put under any pressure by Vardy. Whereas I trust Reece Williams, young as he is, and of course a very difficult situation coming up against one of the Premier League's best strikers of recent years in Jamie Vardy. But Reece Williams, he's dealt with the challenges that have been thrown at him so far, and this would represent another huge step forward in his development as a Liverpool player if he can come through this game unscathed against a player like Jamie Vardy. And I'll come on to the midfield in a moment, but I do think we actually, given the loss of Henderson even, and the fact that Thiago's probably not going to be available for this game, and in the interest of striking the right balance in the centre of the pitch, given the issues we have with the back line at the moment, I think we need Fabinho in midfield, and as a result, I'm perfectly happy with Reece Williams deputising, although, as I've said many times before, do not be surprised if I'm wrong, and do not be surprised if Jurgen Klopp, for the sake of a little bit more stability, goes with Fabinho at centre-half. But I think Reece Williams is built perfectly to go into those battles against a player like Jamie Vardy. And then either side of that centre-half pairing, Robertson, thankfully, is available after a slight injury scare on international duty for Scotland. He played, I think, the full 90 minutes on Wednesday night, I believe it was, the last game of the international break. They had a midweek fixture, and it was kind of up in the air. Obviously, he misses out, I think, over the weekend through a small injury that he picked up in their Euros qualifier. But he is now available, albeit not exactly rested, and I think maybe we have to look at that game against Atalanta as a game where we bring Tsimikas in and just completely take Robertson out the side. I'm not even talking about having him on the bench, just give the lad a rest, because my God, does he need it. But in the meantime, we probably need him for this game. So, and we know that Jamie Vardy does sometimes like to drift wide a little bit, so I can see him coming down Liverpool's left-hand side, and it would be good if Reece Williams especially is on that side for Robertson to just tuck in a little bit and give him a little bit of support in that regard. So I think Robertson plays on the left, and I think we go with Nico Williams as the right back. I know there's potential shouts for James Milner there, but given all the problems we have, we kind of need to be a little bit careful with how we use James Milner, because Liverpool have got a lot of injury issues as it is, and there's every risk that starts to pile up as the games go on, because you can end up in these vicious cycles where you start running out of players, which means other players have to play more, they can't get rests, they pick up more injuries. And given Milner's versatility and his qualities as a utility player, we have got him as backup in midfield, backup at right back, backup as left back. I know he hates it, but he is good enough to play there. So I don't think we should necessarily be using him when we don't have to. And listen, if Trent's going to be out for a few weeks, we can't play Milner every game. And I know Nico Williams has a few of his detractors. He obviously burst onto the scene last season and started very brilliantly. Everyone loved what they saw going forward. Maybe towards the latter part of the season, defensively, he was caught out a few times. But listen, the kid's young. That's naturally going to happen to a young player. The exact same thing happened to Trent Alexander-Arnold, and look how good he is now. And also, obviously, the back end of last season, after we won the league, everyone dropped off a little bit. So it's maybe no surprise that Nico Williams struggled a little bit, because he maybe didn't get the help that he would have got in other circumstances had the players been giving their absolute all, and that they obviously had a league title to be won there. So I don't necessarily think Nico Williams is rubbish by any stretch of the imagination. He's of course not Trent Alexander-Arnold, but he's never going to be Trent Alexander-Arnold unless you play him. So I think while Trent's not available, and while we have to be very cautious about how we use Milner, you could be more cautious, of course, and play Milner for this game because of how you think Leicester are going to play. But at home, I think you've got to look to be on the front foot. Milner's maybe one for the game away from home against Brighton next weekend, and I think we should be putting our faith in Nico Williams. And listen, if Matip plays on that side, he's at least got another player alongside him who's much more experienced, who is going to be able to help him out and talk him through the game a little bit. And then going on to the midfield, I think we play with a 4-2-3-1 for this game, simply because we just haven't really got the players to play in the middle at the moment. I think we have got enough for a midfield three. You've got basically Milner, Fabinho, Gini, Curtis Jones and Naby Keita all available. So there's enough options there. But balance-wise, I can't really think of a 3 in that scenario unless you use James Milner. And like I said, I kind of want to be a little bit careful about how Liverpool use him. That works for this match. So I think we go with the 2. And it also, of course, influences the players ahead of them. And I think it's going to be Gini Wijnaldum and Fabinho. You could maybe shout for Milner in the 2 and give Fabinho or Gini a complete rest. But to be honest, I don't think James Milner works in that role. I think in a 3 as one of the 2 number 8s, either side of the more defensive midfielder, he's absolutely fantastic. But in a 4-2-3-1, if that's what you're going to be playing, he's actually better off in the 3 further forward, just because James Milner's a little bit older. I think people have forgotten that he's actually quite a good attacking midfielder. He's maybe even better going forward than he is defensively. Certainly, he's better as a number 8 than he is as a number 6. And I think in this 4-2-3-1, you basically want players who are as good playing in the 6, the defensive role, as they are in the number 8, the more box-to-box role. And Fabinho and Gini Wijnaldum have those qualities in absolute bucket loads. So I think they start as in midfield 2. Ahead of them, I reckon you go with Firmino in the number 10 position, Mane on the left. I think Shaqiri comes in on the right, and then Jota plays as your number 9. I know that's maybe slightly unorthodox. You could potentially expect Liverpool to go with a front 3, especially with Salah injured. You don't want to be putting too many players up top because you are slightly short of them at the moment. But as we saw at the Etihad, the 3 worked, and I think without Mo Salah, having an extra player in there, it just buys another yard for all the other lads. You know, it creates more space for Xherdan Shaqiri. It creates more space for Diogo Jota as well, and he is, of course, hopefully going to continue that incredible run of form he was on before the international break. But I just think it creates a bit more fluidity as well. It allows these players to express themselves a little bit more freely. And like I said, we should be on the front foot. This game is at home. We are better than Leicester City, and we need to establish that. The fact that they're above us in the league means that they may come into this game with delusions of they can take the match to us, that they can have the better of Liverpool. We've got to show that that is not the case, and that we end the day above them in the Premier League table. And we only do that if we play front foot football, if we take the game to them. And that, I think, means having an extra attacker on the pitch. And also, I just like Xherdan Shaqiri. I think the lad's good. I think he's a bit mad. I think he has qualities that no one else in this Liverpool squad possesses. And as we saw in the game against West Ham, he has the potential to be a match winner with that absolutely superb assist for Diogo Jota. So I'd like to get him on the pitch, and I think as a result, we play that 4-2-3-1. And as I said, it's also to facilitate the lack of players who are available in midfield at the moment. So taking a quick look at Leicester then, in terms of injuries, they have a few absentees here and there. They're missing a few defenders, but none of the major hitters are missing. You know, you look at players like, I think James Maddison will be available, Yuri Tielemans will be available, Jamie Vardy, of course, I think is the player that we all want to watch out for. And I think he is, of course, going to be a pest, especially given that this game is at Anfield. And I think Liverpool have to use that to their advantage and essentially isolate Jamie Vardy. And I think that's why I kind of talk about this horses for courses, game-by-game approach. Liverpool have got to basically adapt their tactics and their play style for every single opponent now, because we aren't the dominant force that we were last season. Last season, we were so good that we could look at any opponent and just say, you know what, we're better than you. And I'm sure they do tactical analysis and they adapt certain players' roles and tweak the system to accommodate what the opponent is. But at the end of the day, Liverpool could go out, play the same 4-3-3 formation, play the same starting 11 every single week, and beat everyone that was in front of them because they are that good. But circumstances have changed. The season is a very different one to anything else we'll experience in our lifetimes. And Liverpool, in terms of personnel, aren't the team they once were because of injuries. So as a result, Liverpool have got to tailor the way they play. And I think one thing that is going to be so important to this match is isolating Jamie Vardy, is cutting off those passing lanes, is making sure that players like Maddison, Tielemans, Harvey Barnes, Iosi Perez are all distanced from Jamie Vardy, at least I'd say 30 yards away from him, because we've seen this happen at Anfield already this season and time again in the past, where teams have looked to defend and play on the counter, and as a result they've left their number 9 up top, sort of somewhere near the halfway line, to try and win knockdowns and stuff like that. But Liverpool have penned the opposition in so much that the ball never even reaches them, and when it does, there's no one around them for them to even knock it down to. We need to be in a situation where, regardless of how many creative players Leicester have on the pitch, and regardless of how much they want to counter-attack and get the ball forward and play with it and play possession football, they are just so focused on taking care of onslaught after onslaught from this Liverpool attack that they cannot even begin to think about getting players like Maddison, Perez, Tielemans in our own half, let alone anywhere near our box. And that is how you isolate Jamie Vardy, and that is how you make one of the most deadly strikers in the Premier League virtually ineffective. We've seen Liverpool do it in the past. I know Jamie Vardy's kind of marketed as this bogey player against us, but I think it's 7 games against us he's played at Anfield. He's only scored twice, and those goals have tended to come from errors and silly mistakes from Liverpool where we've let him have the ball in a dangerous area. So as long as we don't do that, and like I said, as long as we stay on the front foot, and that's why I want players like Shaqiri, Jota, Firmino, Mane all on the pitch. It's why I want someone like Nico Williams on the pitch as well, an attacking right back who's going to be a bit swashbuckling, throw himself forward, get crossed into the box, get into the box as well. You know, we forget that he's actually a different kind of threat to Trent Alexander-Arnold. He likes to get at opponents a bit more. He likes to get closer to the goal and take chances himself rather than just creating them through crosses and passes and stuff like that. So I think we've really got to be on the ball for this match, and that is of course difficult after the international break, and it is of course difficult when Liverpool are lacking the personnel that they have. So it's all hands on deck, and Jurgen Klopp has kind of stressed that in his press conference and in multiple interviews in the past, that when the going gets tough and when Liverpool experience issues and problems that threaten to derail the squad and threaten to derail our fortunes, it brings everyone closer together. The squad bands together to make sure they get through these difficult periods. Look at the Barcelona match. We're missing Salah. We're missing Firmino. We've got to overturn a 3-goal deficit against one of the best teams in the world with the best player of all time. And we did it because that's what this group of players does. So because of that, I'm actually quite confident going into this game, because regardless of who's wearing that red shirt, they're still Liverpool players. They will still run through brick walls for each other, because Jurgen Klopp will make sure that, like I said, doesn't matter who's playing, that will always be the case. So I'm still backing Liverpool to win this weekend, as I pretty much always back Liverpool to win. I don't think it's going to be easy. I think it will be another 1-0, 2-1, 2-0 slog or something like that. Maybe Jamie Vardy gets the goal. I certainly think he's going to get a few chances in this game, but I would still back Liverpool to do the business, get the result, and hopefully, depending on what happens between Tottenham and Man City on Sunday evening, finish the weekend back at the top of the Premier League table. So that is all for today's video. Thank you guys very, very much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, as always, you know what to do. Hit the like button down there. Hit that subscribe button there if you're new around here. Check out some of the other videos that have been out on the channel in the past. Don't forget to follow at LFC Focus TV on Twitter, and I'll be back on Sunday evening after we've hopefully beaten Leicester. Until then, bye for now.